One of the hardest things. Uh, oh, this is a difficult one to share actually. One of the hardest things for me was at the very beginning of my career being able to separate my identity from the organization and the job that I did. So, like, when I left, I wasn't it was almost a toxic relationship. Like it's almost like that. Your first bad boy relationship breaks your heart. You wear rose tinted glasses. There were some good points, but actually it wasn't right for you, and that's completely fine. But I still remember having a somewhat toxic relationship, still wanting to know what was going on in the organization, but then also this part around not being able to fully process who I was away from the organization. Like, what did I care about? Because loads of the things that I did care about were very much intertwined with the organization that I was working at. And that included like spending free time with colleagues, etc., etc. The more I did that, the more I found when the time came, and maybe this doesn't happen for everyone, but if it does happen for you and you're deciding to leave an organization, you're asking yourself, who am I without this organization? Do I know? And sometimes I think it's because we have been trained to work super hard, be perfect, think about the organization. No one explicitly says treat it like it's your own business, but in many cases, the commitment that you have or the sacrifices you make for your job demonstrates its priority in your life, basically. And people talk about like work-life balance. And sometimes I don't think the work life balance has anything to do with the hours you spend in your job. Sometimes it's to do with how bound is your identity with the job you're doing and the organization you work for. What's Leanne? What's the organization? And that one is a really hard one to negotiate. And for me, it was once bitten, twice shy. I only learned through going through it. So I can't say to anybody, this is how you avoid it concretely, because I did it. And it's such a difficult thing to avoid because it's internal pressures, it's circumstance, it's the more you're committed, it should somehow be commensurate to how you progress within the organization. All of those things become so intertwined that in the end it's very difficult to be like, oh yeah, I can just stop now. As I said, like, my learnings don't always have solutions. I'm sorry. But it's definitely one of the things that I think about, and I would love to hear curiously, and it doesn't have to be a comment underneath this post, it could be just like a DM. But I genuinely would love to hear how anyone else dealt with that challenge. I mean, to avoid doing it again, I pretty much didn't engage, and I set up very specific boundaries as to how I wanted to interact with my colleagues, if I even wanted to let certain people in to be my friend. I was very, very reserved. I'm not going to say I was necessarily measured with the hours I worked, just because I wasn't, but I was very, very aware of the things that I did that were no longer Leanne identity things and were kind of bordering on identity, organizational identity, and then I took a step back. But um, to recognize it, I had to go through it. So has anyone else managed to do that, to recognize it, to pivot it whilst you're there and still feel like you're giving your all whilst maintaining your own identity and protecting it? So I'm sorry that today's one is left on a question, but I learned that I wouldn't do it again. However, um, that was one that I had to get burnt rather than observing that from anybody else. But it was also not a topic that people spoke about, right? It felt very much to be a general cultural thing that everybody did that. But I dare say with the new generations, they actively, or the younger generations, they actively think about that in a way that potentially geriatric millennials like myself just didn't.